We're going to start with A.T. Smith. He's the Deputy Director of the U.S. Secret Service, here with us today, and he will be talking on overcoming the challenges of cybercrime and cyber terrorism. Mr. A.T. Smith, a native of Greenville, South Carolina, was appointed Deputy Director in April 2012. As Deputy Director, he executes oversight of the agency's daily operations, including approximately 7,000 personnel and $1.6 billion. He also develops and implements policy as it relates to the agency's investigative and protective mission. Mr. Smith began his Secret Service career in 1986 as a special agent assigned to the Miami Field Office. He has since served in numerous assignments, which include Assistant Director, Office of Investigations, Assistant Director, Human Resources and Training, Deputy Assistant Director, Office of Investigations, Special Agent in Charge, New York Field Office, Special Agent in Charge, Secret Service Training Academy, Executive Assistant to the Director, and Assistant to the Special Agent in Charge of the Presidential Protective Division. Mr. Smith began his law enforcement career in 1978 with the Greenville County Sheriff's Office. Mr. Smith has been the recipient of numerous citations of merit, as well as public service and law enforcement awards. In 2010, he received the Presidential Rank Award for Meritorious Service. In 2006, he was presented the Secretary's Silver Medal by Department of Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff, and in 2004, he was presented with the Department of Homeland Security Secretary's Award of Excellence by Secretary Tom Ridge. Mr. Smith holds a Master of Science in Management from the School of Business, Johns Hopkins University, a Master of Science in Criminal Justice from the University of Alabama, and a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice from the University of South Carolina. Please welcome A.T. Smith.
Thank you, John, very much, and good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see the number here that is here today. I know that with the unfortunate government shutdown and all that is going on, that your schedules had to be rearranged a little bit. I will tell you at the outset that I'm an essential employee, which I think is the good news, and so that was why I decided I should come here and be with you today, but please don't confuse that with anyone who's getting paid to be here or otherwise. So hopefully this will come to a successful conclusion here fairly shortly. Many of you probably know a good bit about the Secret Service, and some of you may not know very much at all. What I wanted to do today is share a little bit of information with you about first our history very quickly, and then tell you a little bit about what we do in the cyber arena. More often than not, people think of the Secret Service in terms of protecting the President and the Vice President, foreign heads of state, and the like. And you traditionally will think about, the agent with the sunglasses and earpiece, and most people don't go beyond that. But actually, we are an agency with a dual mission. And in fact, when we were created in 1865, at the close of the Civil War, our mission was to protect the financial integrity, if you will, of the United States. At the close of the Civil War, somewhere between 1/3 to 1/2 of the paper money in circulation at the time was counterfeit. And in April of 1865, then Secretary of the Treasury Hugh McCulloch went to President Abraham Lincoln, presented a plan to create a federal agency that would be responsible for suppressing the counterfeit problem and restoring the confidence in the American financial system. And for many of you that know history, on April the 14th, later that same day, President Lincoln went to Ford's Theater, and you know the rest of the story. But oddly enough, for the Secret Service, it wasn't for another 35 years, 1901, that we were charged with the responsibility of protecting our national and world leaders. So in that 35-year span, some of our operatives, very aggressive at the time, really put an end to counterfeiting as we know it, or as they knew it during that time, and restored that confidence that we're talking about. And today, we still maintain that core responsibility, or that core violation, to investigate the counterfeiting of U.S. currency worldwide. And today, less than 1/10 of 1% of the money in circulation is actually counterfeit. And so while there is really no economic impact any longer to really speak of, it still is as important today as it was in 1865 to ensure the integrity of our currency. And that's one of the main core missions that we continue to be a part of and to aggressively investigate. Over time, like other things, as I said, our responsibility was to protect the nation's financial infrastructure and the integrity of the financial system. And we, like the world, have grown. We've gone from paper to plastic to terabytes and now petabytes. Because with every advent of technology, as you know it, there are people out there who try to find ways to circumvent it and ultimately steal money from innocent victims or companies. And so our main focus today in terms of our investigative mission is to focus on the financial sector. That's where we started, and that's where we continue today. There are a lot of agencies out there, as you all know, responsible for cyber investigations, and a lot of times there is concurrent jurisdiction and there's crossover between agencies. We try our very best. It's our goal within the Secret Service to give the American taxpayer the best bang for their buck. So we, in the federal system, try our very best to stay in our own lane, but then also to work together whenever we can to not only arrest these criminals that are responsible for this sort of thing, but also to benefit the taxpayers, as we've said. And what we've tried to do over the past several years within the Secret Service is work with other agencies, but at the same time focus on our main the main emphasis of our goal and our mission, and that is the financial sector. We work a lot with our sister agencies within the Department of Homeland Security, particularly HSI and ICE, as well as with the FBI when our jurisdictions can run concurrent that way, but we primarily stay in our own lane. As I said, ours is more cyber intrusions that are major incidents, as well as the theft of identity and other cyber-related incidents. HSI particularly is concerned with child porn, intellectual property, counterfeit property being shipped in from overseas, and that sort of thing. And of course, the FBI is clearly responsible for the intelligence piece. And as we, in these separate lanes, run together, when we run into a case that involves another agency, we gladly work together, and we always strive to do that. What I wanted to do was briefly share with you today a little about the Secret Service cyber mission and tell you how we actually carry that out. As I said, we've sort of grown over the years from paper all the way to what we see today in the cyber arena, but our cyber initiative actually goes back to the late 90s when in our New York field office, which was our flagship office that primarily put together our first electronic crimes task force, saw the need, even before we were given the statutory authority within Title 18 to investigate these kinds of crimes. They saw this on the horizon coming in the late 90s, and we actually began our sort of cyber investigations, if you will, with cellular telephone technology and the way that people stole things related to that back in those days. So we created our first electronic crimes task force in New York. And as a result, that task force grew. And as a result of 9/11, both the President and the Congress saw the initiatives that the Secret Service were making in terms of cyber-related crime. And in the Patriot Act, the Secret Service is actually mandated to not only create more, but to expand our electronic crimes task force model across the country. And we have done that. Today we actually have 29 electronic crimes task forces built on the New York model. And then we have 2 overseas. We have one in London that is still really growing, and we have another one in Rome that tries to carry out sort of the same methods and mission that our domestic ECTFs do here in the United States. These electronic crimes task forces are a partnership, and we go back, as I said, to the late 90s, talking about partnerships with the private sector, but we took it a step further and we involved the academic section with us as well. And so the partnership that is created out of our electronic crimes task forces involves law enforcement, the private sector, particularly the financial segments that are out there, whether it be banks or other financial institutions, as well as academic institutions that can stay on the cutting edge of technology in terms of the cyber-related issues and guide us down that path. We have a tremendous partnership with Carnegie Mellon. We have another partnership with the University of Tulsa, who is really more involved in sort of research for mobile devices. And of late, the latest avenue that we followed in that regard is a partnership with the University of Texas with an institution there that they have created called the Center for Identity, and they're doing a lot of research in terms of identity theft, how it affects obviously the private sector as well as the public sector. So over those years from the Patriot Act forward, as I said, our electronic crimes task forces have grown, and they have become a national model because it involves, as I said, not just law enforcement, not just the government, but the private sector and academic institutions as well. And it's become a model that others have tried to emulate to some degree, but it has been very successful for us. And it's done regionally. The 31 task forces that I mentioned largely are in the bigger cities around the country. Obviously, it grew from New York to Miami, LA, Chicago, and so forth, and then the 2 that we have overseas. And what those task forces do, aside from trying to stay at the forefront of technology, is have quarterly meetings to come in and bring all those segments together that I just described, to have actual case studies presented without necessarily revealing the identity or the victim in question, but to give real-time current information to those stakeholders about the kinds of crimes that are sort of on the forefront, the kinds of crimes and incidents that may have occurred to some of the partners or others that may become victims. So they do real-time case studies at these quarterly meetings, and they're geared in 2 ways. We have more of a centralized approach so that we can talk about trends worldwide, what we're seeing throughout the world, and then usually a part of those quarterly meetings are dedicated to more local issues, if you will, where again, if a member of a task force from the private sector wants to present or has been victimized, that sort of thing is done as well. So those task forces, we feel like, capture both a global and a regional concept, and they've been very successful over the years that we have been involved in. The other way that we try to promote sort of our outreach, if you will, to the public through this cyber initiatives is through a location that we developed in concert with a number of partners a few years ago, and this is really the crust of what I wanted to talk to you about today and show you how we try to stay involved in public outreach at the local level. One of the sort of the underpinnings of DHS is again reaching out to state and locals and trying to make sure that everyone has a comprehensive look at what the problems are and the things that we're facing. So a few years ago, in partnership with the Department of Homeland Security, with the state of Alabama, the city of Hoover, Alabama, and the Alabama District Attorneys Association, we came up with a concept and an idea called the National Computer Forensics Institute. And I want to give you just an outline, and then I have just a few slides to show you about the institute itself. But this is a prime example of how government at the federal level, the local level, and the state level, in concert with, again, the department and some private sector partners, came together to create a facility that does what it is we need to do, and that is find a way to investigate crime and arrest these cyber criminals that are out there victimizing people every day. And again, I want to be clear, as I was, I hope, at the beginning when I said that our main focus within the Secret Service is not about the intelligence issues that go on that you read so much about today, although again, we do have some crossover with that, but our primary goal is to arrest criminals and put them in jail, to see them incarcerated. That's why we are involved in the investigative mission that I mentioned a minute ago, and that is our main goal, to arrest criminals. And I want to be clear about that. because sometimes a lot of things you hear about in the media will talk about cyber crime and hacks and things that occur, but you never really see someone arrested. So I want to be clear about our goal, and the NCFI helps us carry that goal out. As I said, this was created through funding provided by the federal government, but also by the state of Alabama, who committed about $5 million toward the construction of the facility, and then also the city of Hoover, who offered actually the space that was renovated and now houses the Institute. And in a nutshell, what this does, and a part of why the Secret Service is so proud of it, is it brings in state and local authorities, police officers, prosecutors, and judges, all at the local and state level. There are no federal employees brought in and trained at this facility under this program. Now, this again operates under federal funding at about $4 million a year that provides this training and equipment that we ultimately give to these individuals and folks who come there. So no federal employee really receives the benefit of this. It is truly an entity, again, within the department that pushes our services and our liaison efforts out to the state and local agencies. And what this does in sort of concept is creates not only a huge liaison effort that the Secret Service is involved in, but it becomes a force multiplier. As these police officers are trained, they are trained under the same process that our agents who are trained in these forensics exams and different parts of sort of the investigative piece, and they are actually given the computer equipment at the end of their training to take back with them to their local departments and their local agencies to use in the investigation of cybercrime. And going back to what we said, as technology has changed over the years, there's very few crimes anymore that don't in one way or another involve a computer. So while our primary focus, as I said, is in the financial lane, these people that are trained by us go back and they investigate crimes that they are involved with every day. And that could be anything from murders, rapes, robberies, you name it. But again, through our training, we have a way of producing a sort of force multiplier here that puts a lot of people back out into the community that are now poised to investigate these sorts of crimes. And since we actually developed and got the Institute up and running in 2008, I'm happy to report that we've trained a total of 2,050 individuals, about 1,300 state and local police officers or law enforcement officers, about 528 prosecutors, about 165 judges, and then we've done some additional training for the private sector, as I mentioned a minute ago. Now, you may ask why judges and prosecutors. We feel like it's very important for prosecutors to be able to understand cybercrime and understand the ways in which to prosecute it, and by the same time for the judges who hear those cases to also have some knowledge about what is involved in cybercrime and what those cyber criminals may actually be doing in order to carry out their crimes. So we felt that the curriculum was important to involve all three of those entities. As I said, we feel like it becomes a force multiplier for us that is positive and creates added benefit across the nation. And of those numbers I just gave you, there are 680 separate entities or agencies represented, all from the 50 states across the country and 3 additional territories. So the impact here is far-reaching. Just because we were in the partnership with the state of Alabama does not mean that it is exclusively from Alabama or the state or anywhere in that region. Again, the training has occurred for individuals from all across the country, all 50 states. We train at different levels there. If you think about the 3 levels of training, to put it sort of in layman's terms, as I understand it, we teach people sort of be first responders to realize when a crime has been committed, maybe how to secure the scene or the computer. People that are more like investigators that then can have the expertise to try to investigate who may have committed the crime, whether it's running back through IP addresses and things like that, the information. And then finally, forensics examiners, who would be more like the lab technician, who really can get to the root of some of the development of the malware and things that might have occurred on the very technical end of investigating these sorts of crimes. And again, we have partnered throughout the federal government to try to include as many others into this notion of training as we can. We certainly have had other federal entities want to proffer state and local individuals, whether it be police officers, judges, or prosecutors. And again, that is sort of done through a system. We have far more people apply than actually get in. And we operate this facility at about $4 million a year. That's budgeted federally. But quite frankly, we're only operating at about 25% capacity. We could do, if we had the money, like most things, probably 3 times more than what we're actually doing. But for our purposes, we think this has been a tremendous asset both to law enforcement, but also to state and local entities as well as individuals. So what I wanted to do is just briefly show you a little slideshow, if you will, about the Institute and give you an idea of what we've accomplished here. The mission of the center, as I said, pretty plainly, is just to create a force multiplier. It's something that we had the idea about, again, as far back as 2007, 2008, and our partners were tremendous in creating. This is a shot at the facility itself in Hoover, Alabama. Inside, as I said, a result of the partnerships that I outlined, this facility is really state-of-the-art and could do so much more, as most of us could, but actually operates on a annual budget of only $4 million. The facility itself, as I said, is state-of-the-art. The latest technology as far as the equipment used for training there is cutting edge, and as well there are other parts to the center beyond just the actual classrooms. There's labs and obviously facilities there as well. And there is also a mock courtroom on site there so that they can do mock trials. And as I said before, the students that are there represent every area of the country. And you can see the number of nominations that we receive annually for the number of slots we're able to offer. So it's usually somewhere around 4 to 1. The mock courtroom that I mentioned. And then again, the advantage for state and local entities that come there, there is no tuition, there is no travel cost, there is no equipment cost. All of this is provided through the funding that we offer. So when you have a very small police department somewhere in the Midwest or in a very rural area that cannot afford this kind of training or this kind of equipment, it's a huge advantage for them to be able to come attend this for 2 or 3 weeks, depending upon the course they're in. And then the advantage for us, as I said, is it becomes a force multiplier, so that those individuals are out there and they become, in essence, a mini lab that our agents that are in those rural areas can then call on if they need to. Training, again, we talked about the different courses offered there and how many we've conducted over the last several years. And one of the interesting things, a little self-promotion here, I know. There was so much interest in this through the Congress. Congressman Baucus, who obviously represents that district, was very instrumental in helping us to achieve the funding. And as a result of the success we've had there, we not only have had hearings in Congress about the success of the facility, but actually he had a field hearing there a couple of years ago to talk about it as well. And again, it may be something that you haven't heard very much about, but I can assure you it's something that we try very hard to make sure, as I said again at the outset, that tax dollars are spent in the right way, and that in the end, we're doing the right thing for the community. And in the end, as I said, it helps us not only with our liaison effort, but we also consider it, on top of all that it provides, a payback to our law enforcement partners that are out there at the state and local level that help us tremendously on the other side of our mission, back to the protective mission. because we could not, as most of you know, adequately move our protectees around the country and the world without the support of local law enforcement. So this is a little bit of a payback in the investigative arena for what all of these state and local partners help us do in the protective arena. So it serves two purposes, and it's really a good program. And I know that time is tight, but I did want to just share this with you because it's something that, you know, as I said, it probably doesn't get the publicity it deserves, and it probably doesn't get the funding it deserves, but nevertheless, it's something that we at the Secret Service are very proud of, and also helps to promote sort of our cyber mission within the investigative mission. So with that, I appreciate it. If any of you have questions, I'll be happy to answer.